Captain Underpants and the Terrifying Return of Tippy Tinkletrousers is a 2012 American children's novel and the ninth book in the Captain Underpants series by Dav Pilkey. It was published on August 28, 2012, 6 years after the publication of the previous book. Tippy Tinkletrousers is actually Professor Poopypants, as revealed in the previous book. This book explains how Tippy Tinkletrousers arrived at the end of the 8th book, as well as a prequel story of George and Harold in kindergarten explaining how their friendship began and setting the page for the life before Captain Underpants. Plot. The story continues where the previous book left off, with George and Harold running away from Tippy Tinkletrousers. As they are running away, the book reveals that Tippy actually came from the future and disrupted the timeline. The story then explains what really happened before Tippy disrupted the timeline, and George and Harold are arrested for the crimes that their alternate versions from the 8th novel, Captain Underpants and the Preposterous Plight of the Purple Potty People, did, and the two, as well as Mr. Krupp, are imprisoned. Meanwhile, at the Prequel State Penitentiary, Tippy, who was a prisoner since the 4th book, is asked to build a statue of Warden Gordon Borden Schmorden, who is chief jailer of the prison. Tippy does the task but instead builds a giant robot suit. On the day Tippy presents his robot suit to Warden Schmorden, he reveals his work, the same suit used at the very end of the 8th book but with an upper half, climbs into the suit and freezes everyone in his way. Tippy then takes Mr. Krupp and orders him to find George and Harold, wanting information about Captain Underpants. Tippy soon finds George and Harold and puts Mr. Krupp down. George and Harold snap their fingers, which makes Mr. Krupp turn into Captain Underpants. Tippy chases Captain Underpants, unsuccessfully trying to freeze him. Soon, he accidentally freezes his robotic legs to the school's football field. Captain Underpants breaks off the top half of Tippy's robot and Tippy escapes by going back in time to 5 years ago. The story rewinds to 5 years, 11 days, 14 hours and 6 minutes ago, the day before George and Harold met. George has recently moved to Piqua, Ohio from Michigan into the house next door to Harold, and Harold is shy at school and also dealing with his parents' divorce. Harold has a hard school life because of Kipper Krupp, Mr. Krupp's 6th grade nephew who abuses his uncle's authority to terrorize kindergarteners. On George's first day of school, his mother makes him wear a tie to make a good impression. On his way to school, he notices Harold being attacked by Kipper and his group, with the mean owner of a petrol station, Billy Bill, egging them on. George changes the owner's sign from "Free Brake Inspection" to "Free Bra Inspection," resulting in a group of offended women to attack him. George then saves Harold by whipping the bullies with his tie in Indiana Jones style, and the two become best friends. Mr. Krupp arrives and sends the two to detention for bullying Kipper. To pass time, the two make their first comic book, The Adventures of Dog Man. George and Harold plan to put a stop to Kipper by exploiting his stupidity. They study Kipper for a week and then formulate a tale. They break into his locker by switching his padlock for one of their own locks, and take the $916 of lunch money Kipper stole, and put in girly things like friendship bracelets, dresses, and dolls, while sending strange texts to Kipper's goons to humiliate him, all while placing a note from Wedgie McGee with it. However, Kipper eventually catches on to the setup and, the next day, him and his gang steal the pizzas that George and Harold bought for the kindergartners. In retaliation, the two friends fill the 4 bullies' lockers with shaving cream to pass it off as ectoplasmic ghost juice. While initially this works, Mr. Krupp, who happens to use the brand, points out that the ectoplasm is indeed shaving cream and that it was obviously sprayed through the vents on doors. Enraged and tired of the anonymous pranks, Kipper and his friends begin to torture the kindergarteners for answers, though they are oblivious to the culprits themselves. That same day, they again steal the pizzas that George and Harold had ordered for the kindergarteners, only to learn agonizingly that these are topped with extremely spicy ghost chili peppers. George and Harold eventually create a comic book that tells the tale of Wedgie McGee and the signs of his curse, all of which match the pranks that George and Harold have done. After Kipper and his gang see the ghost of Wedgie McGee, George on stilts wearing a giant pair of pants, they run outside during a thunderstorm and power outage in terror. In the original timeline, they then apologize for their deeds, give the kindergartners compensation, and never bully anyone again. Unfortunately, Tippy arrives in the past at exactly the same time Kipper's gang runs outside. The four bullies go insane from fear as Tippy's robot closely resembles the ghost of Wedgie McGee. This makes the police accuse Mr. Krupp of causing Kipper and his friends insanity, causing him to lose his job. Tippy then time travels to 4 years in the future, thinking that kids 5 years ago were weird. However, as Mr. Krupp was hypnotized to become Captain Underpants when George and Harold were in the 4th grade, a paradox happens, and a universe is created where Captain Underpants never existed. Tippy arrives in the present only to find out all that remains of Earth is a flaming and devastated wasteland, caused by Dr. Diaper's Laser-O-Matic 2000, overrun by giant evil zombie nerds. At the end, Tippy seemingly gets squashed and killed by 2 zombie nerds who once were George and Harold. A reference to the 3rd book. What is left of Tippy is a red squishy stain, which appears to be blood. Mr. Krupp becomes sad because he got fired. The story ends here, but Zombie Nerd George and Zombie Nerd Harold didn't shout out their cries of "Oh no, and here we go again." Comics equals The Adventures of Dogman equals. The comic centers around an unnamed police officer whose partner is a specially trained police dog named Greg. The duo are professionals at catching criminals. One day, the cop and Greg spot a bomb, but they arrive too late to defuse it. The duo is critically injured by the bomb's explosion and are taken to the hospital. The doctor announces that Greg's body is dying and the cop's head is dying. Fortunately, the nurse has a great idea. The surgical crew will cut off Greg's head and sew it on the cop's body. The doctor accepts the idea and the hospital crew hold the big operation. The operation is successful and everyone calls the new Dog-Man hybrid Dog-Man. Dog-Man catches criminals with his sensitive nose, hears crimes with his ears, and punches criminals with his fists. But Dog-Man has one mortal fear: vacuum cleaners. PT. Of The Adventures of Super Diaper Baby 2. Rip Van Tinkle's former feline minion sees Dog-Man's weakness, so he invents an evil vacuum robot. The vacuum robot steals all the money from the bank, and Dog-Man comes to stop it, but the vacuum chases him. The robot chases Dog-Man until he is cornered. Dog-Man is certain he will die, but fortunately, the vacuum robot, which is plugged in, unplugs and shuts down. Dog-Man then destroys the robot and follows the robot's cord, which leads to PT's hideout, and Dog-Man arrests him. Dog-Man celebrates his victory by drinking some alcohol-free wine with his fellow cops. This comic was then made into a book in 2016 with lots of other Dog-Man comics, with a sequel planned to come out either the same year or in 2017. The Curse of Wedgie McGee equals The comic is about a boy called Wedgie McGee who is bullied up to the point where he can't bear it any longer. He visits a fortune teller who tells him she will concoct an anti-Wedgie elixir. However, the fortune teller is short-sighted and grabs a voodoo elixir by mistake. The next day, Wedgie rubs the elixir onto his trousers, turning them into a ghost. He then dies of embarrassment. That evening, the trousers return for revenge and swallow up the bullies. Signs of the curse. The victim will begin to act weird. The victim wants to play with dolls, dresses and bracelets. The victim gets ectoplasm, ghost juice, and spiders on their belongings. Food like pizza is very spicy to the victim. The victim will feel a burning sensation in the armpits. How to undo the curse. The victim must undo their bad deeds and never pick on kindergarteners ever again. Characters. Present. George Beard, a 10 3/4-year-old boy. Harold Hutchins, a 9-year-old boy. Mr. Krupp, the principal of George and Harold. Captain Underpants, Mr. Krupp's alter ego. Tippy Tinkletrousers, formerly called Professor Poopypants in the 4th book, but changed his name. The Chief of Police, I lead a cop. Officer McQuiggly, right-hand man of the Chief. Warden Gordon Borden Schmorden, the Chief Jailer of Pequea State Penitentiary. Characters. Past. George Beard, a 5 3/4-year-old boy. Harold Hutchins, a 6-year-old boy. Mr. Krupp, the principal of George and Harold, and uncle of Kipper. Kipper Krupp, the captain of the 6th grade wrestling team. School bully of the kindergarteners, and nephew of Mr. Krupp. Finkstein Noviz, one of Kipper's friends and wrestling teammates. Bug Uzalowski, one of Kipper's friends and wrestling teammates. Loogie Tope, one of Kipper's friends and wrestling teammates. Ladies, an angry mob of offended young, middle-aged, and elderly women who beat up Billy Bill as the result of a prank out of karma. Courtesy of George. 2 of them resemble Ms. Ribble and Ms. Anthrope. Billy Bill, the less-than-friendly gas station owner who resembles Mr. Mina. The cheerleaders. Wendy Swan and her girls are the cheerleaders. They have been screaming and shrieking from seeing ectoplasm. Shaving cream. Wedgie McGee, a kindergartner in the comic book. The Gossip Girls, 4 gossipy girls who are listened by George. The delivery guy of the Pequea Pizza Palace. Ms. Ribble, the teacher of Jerome Horwitz Elementary School. Mr. Fide, the former science teacher of Jerome Horwitz Elementary School and current resident. Mentioned in the newspaper. Of the Pequea Valley, home of the reality challenged. Donnie Schumeyer, a kindergartner of Jerome Horwitz Elementary School and the first to suffer from Kipper's wrath upon him catching on to the ectoplasm. Shaving cream. Prank. Reception. Reception for the book was mostly positive, with Kidsreads.com praising the entry. Booklist gave a positive review, writing that it would have a definite appeal to kids. Kirkus Reviews gave an ambivalent review, stating that the book's jokes were typical but that there were signs that the creative wells are running dry at last. Trivia. Interestingly, the talking toilets are mentioned as some of the villains who ended up taking over the world in the alternate future where Captain Underpants never existed. In Captain Underpants and the Attack of the Talking Toilets. However, Mr. Krupp banned George and Harold from the 2nd annual Invention Convention, which caused George and Harold to ruin everyone's projects, apart from Melvin's, and it was also Mr. Krupp who gave them detention, leading to the creation of the talking toilets. If Mr. Krupp had been fired before the 2nd annual Invention Convention, the talking toilets or the dreaded Turbo Toilet 2000 shouldn't have existed. Neither of them could have created the Dandelion of Doom because George and Harold were shown as zombie nerds. which could have only have happened if they didn't know about Zorx, Clax, and Jennifer's scheme. Since they created the Dandelion of Doom in an attempt to get rid of the aliens, neither of them could have created the Dandelion of Doom. See also Captain Underpants and the Preposterous Plight of the Purple Potty People. Captain Underpants and the Revolting Revenge of the Radioactive Robo-Boxes. Captain Underpants and the Terrifying Return of Tippy Tinkletrousers at Scholastic.com.